Okay. Again, thank you, Diana, for agreeing to be part of this interview for COOP Dialogue 7. As Shivali mentioned, this is the 7th edition, and we appreciate your taking the time to talk with us on social and services cooperatives. And we could think of no one better than you to speak on the subject, to know about what the issues are and what the challenges facing this particular sector relating to social and services cooperative. And we see that there is potential in the Asia Pacific region to work more on these two types of cooperatives. But we thought it's better for us to hear from you, to understand from your vantage point, both as the Secretary General of CICOPA and being based in Europe, where there's a lot of work that has gone on, both in the social and services cooperative sector. So let's start. And I would like to ask you to provide an overview on CICOPA's role and its mission in supporting social and service cooperatives. And if you could also help us in terms of, I understand that there is a distinction between the two. There is the social cooperative and there is service cooperative, and both are distinct. So if you could also help in elaborating on what these distinctions are and how CICOPA is working in this area to start with.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks a lot, colleagues from IC Asia Pacific, for this invite. I mean, it's a pleasure for me to be here with you today and give this perspective from CICOPA on those important questions. I should first underline that Asia Pacific is a very important region for CICOPA. As you know, I mean, recently we have seen the creation of CICOPA Asia Pacific, which also testify the importance of our sectors, service and industrial sectors in your region. So I'm very glad that you came to me and gave me this opportunity to speak with you today. So indeed, we should start maybe with clarifying a bit the concepts we are using. As you know, CICOPA represents cooperatives in industry and services, which covers a variety of economic activities. I mean, for industry is quite clear. It's mainly manufacturing activities, but we can also find some other industrial activities like waste management. We also represent the cooperatives in the construction sector. But then we have this big group of service activities, which, as I said, covers very different types of services. We have cooperatives providing what we call services of general interest, so services that are essential for people's well-being, such as care services, social services, education, culture, etc. But then we also have other types of services which are not services of general interest, such as transport services, or also cooperatives active in logistics or IT. So this is important to underline that our service part is very diverse in terms of economic activities. While in terms of typologies, we represent mainly worker cooperatives. I think more or less 70% of our cooperatives are worker cooperatives. But it's important to underline that we also have an important amount of cooperatives that we call social cooperatives. So what do we mean by social cooperatives? We mean either cooperatives providing services of general interest that I mentioned before, that are essential for people's well-being, that are connected to also people's social rights. So we said care, childcare, elderly care, care for people with disabilities, etc. So what we would call more like a social services. But we also call social cooperatives whose core mission is the work integration of disadvantaged workers. So those could be cooperatives active in any kind of sector. So even, for example, in craft, but their core mission, and it's part of their status, is to provide work to those who are the most vulnerable when it comes to getting access to employment, such people with disabilities or other type of disadvantaged groups as they can be defined by some countries. It could be people with coming from ethnic minorities. It could be, we could find other types of disadvantaged groups depending on how they're defined in the countries. So this is a bit important to underline that not all service cooperatives are social cooperatives, and not all social cooperatives are active in the service sector. So that would be my first clarification. Now, when it comes to CICOPA and our role and mission in supporting such cooperatives, I should maybe first say, maybe this is obvious for you, but let's always underline that we, as an international organization representing those cooperatives, we don't liaise every day directly with cooperatives, but we work with federations, which means that our members are national federations representing those cooperatives. So what we do, we mainly create a space for our members, meaning federations, together build joint actions, policy priorities, policy messages, and to convey them toward either international organizations, but also inside the cooperative movement. I think this is also important to underline, that our role as CICOPA is also to bring more awareness and visibility toward our sectors also inside the biggest cooperative family. What we also do is that we follow the current trends and topics that are relevant for our cooperatives. So we try to follow the situation in different countries and try to understand if there are some shared and common trends. For example, one of the recent areas we've been working on is the care sector, and I think we can come back to that a bit later. That has been identified as one of the important trends, tendency, also potential for cooperatives to grow in the service sector. Platform economy could be another one, transition from informal to formal employment, etc. Then what we also do in CICOPA is we organize peer learning and the peer exchange among our members. So we provide them an opportunity and space where they could learn from each other, present their good practices, and in turn transfer some of good practices that they will learn from each other at their level. So we call those learning opportunities, we call them mutual learning sessions. We organize them several times per year, and we identify together with members which are the topics of their interest. It can be on financing, it can be on policy frameworks, but it can also be on some concrete actions that federation put in place, such, for example, how to ensure better gender equality inside federations or cooperatives. So we will address those topics and provide those learning opportunities, mutual learning opportunity for our members. Then, last but not least, what we also try to do more and more is to ensure intercooperation and also more than peer learning, as I said before, also B2B. We also try to provide opportunities for our either federations to engage in some partnerships. It could be also economic opportunities for them to work together, but also among cooperatives. So I come back what I said before. Our first mission is not directly to work with cooperatives, we work with federations, but with the technological advancements and new platforms of communication today, it's easier than before also to create events or opportunities for cooperators to meet all around the world and to discuss and work together. So this is also something it's a bit more recent for us, that we are also trying to engage in those more cooperative to cooperative partnerships and exchanges. But we see that there's a huge interest in that and a lot of demand coming from our members. And one of the initiative, but we can come back to that later as well, is this coding initiative that we will also organize in New Delhi, that is focusing mostly on the tech sector. So, for example, to coding, we also allow tech cooperatives around the world to get together, exchange, and create joint actions and learn from each other.
Thank you. I think that was quite an elaborate response. You touched on quite a number of points there. One, I think now we need to also be clear, or we are clear in terms of the distinction between services and social cooperatives, but we are using the and, so we are using them together. But we need to better understand that distinction when we talk with people, that social and cooperatives and services cooperatives are different. And thank you for also mentioning about CICOPA Asia Pacific. Yes, I think it's an initiative which we've started in the region in 2021. And since then, through the members, I see that the members have increased and the activities are increasing. And one of the reasons why we also sort of wanted to get CICOPA Asia Pacific going is some of the issues that you'd mentioned in terms of, or I must say, to a large extent, if we look at the Asia Pacific region, the cooperatives, again, given the historical reasons why cooperatives started, they tend to be more in the agriculture sector, in the credit and banking sector, and maybe there are a few housing cooperatives along those lines. But what we see is many countries in the region are also progressing on the economic ladder. So services is becoming very important in many countries. In fact, that's the fastest growing sector.
Yeah.
So we felt that there is the need for looking at the service related cooperative. And the second was in terms of I think that's something which I would ask you to elaborate. You mentioned about the trend. And we are seeing that in terms of the demographic changes that happening in the region. And given the diversity of the Asia Pacific region, we find that some countries, it's still a very young population, whereas some countries are rapidly aging. And I would put Japan, Korea, Singapore in that pocket, whereas countries like India, Indonesia, and Vietnam, Philippines have a lot of the younger generation. But then again, the services cooperatives and social cooperatives would fit for both these categories. And we can come to that, like you said, later. But what are the overall trends that you're seeing, maybe both in the services sector and the social sector? And if you could elaborate on that, maybe in a general sense, and maybe also could relate to the Asia Pacific region also.
So you're right, Balu, when you say that the service sector is maybe one of the youngest sectors in the cooperative movement, and I think this is also not just for the case for Asia Pacific. I think it's the case everywhere. I mean, also in Europe, when I mean we see that. The oldest industrial cooperatives are more than 100 years old, but it's just recently that we have seen cooperatives entering new services. So what we call in Europe services of general interest. I mean, I explained what I mean by that earlier. Are usually those services that traditionally were being taken by the state and organized by the state. When we talk about care, childcare, services for people with disabilities, all those services were traditionally organized by the state. I mean, a bit everywhere, not just in Europe. But we also see that with this trend of privatization of public services, we've seen some kind of lack of coverage for those services, and the need for the community, for population to self-organize and provide their own answers to those needs. And this is where cooperatives came as kind of as a spontaneous community-based reaction solution for unmet needs coming from the public authorities. Also, I mean, in that sector, if we talk about the services of general interest, we also see the private sector is entering quite I mean, also entering in this sector, but very often the private profit-based sector doesn't find this sector quite interesting economically, because it's not profitable enough for them. So there are some places, regions, especially remote rural areas, where there is no coverage of those sectors, and people are left alone without any support. And this is really where we see cooperatives, as I said before, emerging as an interesting tool to people to self-organize and answer to those needs. So this will be the first element. Then you spoke about aging population, which indeed it's a global trend. Of course, not equal among same countries, but nevertheless, it's an equal trend. So we've seen cooperatives starting to engage in care services, being it for elderly, but also not only, also for childcare. And this is one of the most recent sectors, but also the most growing sectors for service cooperatives. And we see here a huge potential also over the years to come for cooperatives to engage in these sectors. So aging population is one element, but that's not the only element why that explains this growing sector. Also, for example, another element important to underline is an increasing amount of women working today, which also then create needs for professional services to take care about children or elderly, because women usually, we know that care very often is undertaken by women, also in private household. So if more and more women are going to work, who's going to take care of the children and then elderly? So this is why we also need professional services to take those services and organize them. And so this is also a very important area where we see cooperatives reacting. So that would be one of the biggest trends we see today across world. Of course, some countries are quite developed here. I mean, we know, for example, that Italy is they are clearly pioneers when it comes to organizing cooperatives, for example, in the care sector. They even started in the last century, in the 80s. But we also see today in Asia Pacific some countries with a very significant amount of cooperatives in that sector. For example, Japan, to be mentioned. Almost 70% of worker cooperatives in Japan are engaged in the provision of care services, either for elderly care, child care, or care support to people or children with disabilities. Also to be mentioned, Australia has a very interesting initiative that has been put in place recently to support care cooperatives. The BCCM, Business Council of Cooperatives and Mutuals from Australia, has received a $7 million Australian dollars grant from the Australian government to implement a Care Together program in order to create and strengthen care cooperatives as a solution to Australia's challenges that are facing, especially in markets where service delivery is failing, including regional, remote, and rural communities. So we see that not just cooperatives are reacting to answer to people's need when it comes to the care sector. But we also see slowly some governments who understand that cooperatives can be a very interesting partner in delivering community care services that are have a lot of added values, because they are able to provide good quality and good efficiency of the service to the community. But we also know cooperatives are also known for providing better working conditions for care workers. By the way, we know that also working conditions in the care sector are a big challenge today, because it's one of the sectors with quite precarious working conditions worldwide. So we really see here a potential. And I would also like to end my answer to this question with also a quite positive note from last year, when the ILO, International Labour Organization, during their international labor conference, issued resolution where they promoted cooperatives as being an interesting model for organization, provision of care services. So I really see that there's a momentum here for cooperatives to seize this potential. But of course, it's not only on our shoulders. We also need, on the other side, we need governments that understand that and support cooperatives in this way, because we cannot just overcome this huge challenge alone. We need sound partnership and recognition coming from governments, and with adequate support to be able to do this together.
Thank you for that. And yes, you did mention about Japan, and a member there, the Japan Workers Cooperative Union, has done a phenomenal job in terms of organizing and also being able to get the Worker Cooperative Act passed, the first one
Indeed.
after 40 years. So it's
Indeed.
quite a commendable job that JWCU did. So it brings me, yes, you talked about both the care economy and in these also in the services sector, talking about how private interest is not too interested in not only in terms of the profit which are generated, but also because of geography. They are not interested. And there are even the thing about being informal is also one of the issues for organizing becomes an issue. So you talked within this that there are immense opportunities, and you did share some examples of how from Japan and Australia, cooperatives are working to step in to the space to address needs of women, of disadvantaged, of elderly, etc., child, etc. But what are the kind of challenges that you see, the significant challenges that social and service cooperatives face? You did mention about government and the support is needed. So do you see other challenges that cooperatives in these areas are facing?
Well, definitely. I think if especially we look at those services of general interest, I think that first the challenge is to be quick enough, reactive enough to enter and organize and provide such services. I mean, we know that it's not those areas. It's not easy. I mean, if you want to set up a childcare cooperative, it's not something that you can do in few days. And those are complex. Those are complex sectors that require, as I said before, also partnerships with public authorities. So I think that that's the first challenge, is the reactivity. And in order for us to be able to be reactive and come on time and provide those services, and maybe not to let the private profit-oriented sector coming to step in those sectors before, we need, as I said before, this recognition coming from the public authorities. We need sound partnerships. There are some interesting and good practices. The Australian one is a definitely interesting one. I mean, a grant that is provided by the government to the cooperative movement to implement a program to create cooperatives in such a sector. This is one. Another interesting opportunity is to co-design together between the cooperative movement and the public authorities to co-design together services and to allow cooperatives to have the adequate means to implement it. Why I'm talking about co-designing is because cooperatives, since they are the community, they bring the community voices. They know what the community needs, so they know which kind of services are needed by the community. And I really believe that governments should recognize this role of the cooperative movement and sit together and to see how they can implement together some specific actions and programs to target specific communities, specific regions, or specific needs. So this is one of the, I would say, the biggest challenges. Regulation and policies, of course. I mean, it's not. I think it's not useless to underline that in some countries it's impossible to establish a cooperative in such sectors such as, for example, childcare. There are some countries that still do not have a law allowing cooperatives to enter those services. So I think this is also important to underline, that we need proper frameworks. And you mentioned our Japanese colleagues and their 40 years fight to have a law allowing them to operate as worker cooperatives. So this is also important, I think, the regulation and adequate policies. And then, I mean, other challenges, I think we also have to see some challenges as opportunities. I think that the platform economy today is clearly a challenge, but also opportunity for the cooperative sector to enter maybe in also a new area of activities. I mean, we know that platform cooperatives are still quite marginalized. I mean, there are amazing and interesting examples worldwide of cooperatives active in the platform economy, but they are still very little, and unfortunately, they are still are struggling to find a place in the big monopolies that have been created by big international platforms. So here again, we see that there are some opportunities to enter in this new sector and to provide people with services, but also working conditions that are decent and that that are based on cooperatives' values and principles.
Thank you. And one of the challenges that we see here, which is also found in the agriculture and consumer sector, is there are vested interests. There are middlemen, for example, in the care economy area in India and some states, with the private person who places these workers. So they are very dependent on this person, and it's very difficult for the workers to break away and start something because the system itself, the private person is connected with the doctor, he's connected with the hospital, so he knows what kind of needs are there and he's able to place. So I think one of the challenges that we see here in organizing is also how do you kind of break the vested interests which are there, and to be able to give the confidence to the workers that yes, if you can come out of it and be able to also manage a cooperative or any other form collective on your own. But that's something which we could discuss in at a different time in terms of how these interests can be addressed. You did mention this was something which I wanted to, I'll still ask. You had mentioned about examples from Japan and Australia. And have you seen also, or could you also share examples from some other countries that you saw in the Asia Pacific region, in particular post-COVID, how some of the co-ops addressed the needs, or from the wars, anything that comes to mind?
Well, definitely those two will be the most relevant when it comes to when it comes to the care sector. And I made kind of I also wanted to address specifically this sector because I think there's a huge opportunity in this sector especially. But I believe that I mean, we know that there are also some interesting examples in other countries. By the way, I would be also happy to share some publications we have made recently on care cooperatives worldwide, including Asia Pacific. Of course, I mean, we have many examples that we also share on our website. But if you, I mean, what you mentioned also the COVID-19, and I think what we also saw is it's an incredible and very impressive reactivity of our cooperatives, also in Asia Pacific, but other regions, to adapt to the situation and the crisis situation that we faced with the pandemic. We've seen an incredible flexibility and reactivity of cooperatives to adapt to people's needs, to also adapt their production processes, what they were doing in order to provide solutions to the new needs. And we are often I hear people saying, but the cooperative governance must be something that is very heavy, that is takes a lot of time. And indeed, I think we have seen with the COVID-19 crisis that the opposite is true. That it's thanks to our also cooperative governance that cooperatives were able to very quickly sit together and think how they should react to the crisis situation. And we also see this when natural disasters happens, this reactivity of cooperatives, and this very strong principle 6, cooperation among cooperative, that is as I like to say, not just a principle for us, but also, I mean, a key component of the way that we function. We've seen very impressive reactions after natural disasters, when the cooperative movement comes with solidarity reactions, and also with the solidarity funds to help colleagues, other cooperatives, but also community in large who are hit by the disasters. So many interesting examples in Korea as well in this way. So for sure.
Yeah, given that we are based in India, one of the cooperatives doing very active work in this area, which comes to mind, is Seva. And I think I have definitely engaged with them, and they are also involved in both the services and in the social area. And so that's a very prominent example when we talk about India.
Seva is an amazing example that is looked by many countries worldwide as an inspiration. I mean, it's impressive with the diversity of activities and actions they are providing, and especially the focus on women. I mean, what they are providing to women, which goes beyond economic emancipation. It's amazing. And I mean, of course, we talk a lot and often about Seva, and I can tell you that there are many interests worldwide about their model, and yeah, it's an amazing inspiration for many people in the cooperative movement, and also outside the cooperative movement.
That's true. You did mention that government support is very important, and we also need to be engaging with the policy makers. And the example from Japan shows that you need to be actively lobbying and working with policy makers. How do you all, again, could you share your experience from Europe in terms of how you all have been successful in kind of lobbying and working with governments to be able to make policy changes or be supportive to cooperatives which are working in the social and services sector? Because we see an important area where there is lack of experience here, and that we need to be doing more.
Indeed. So what we have found in analyzing a bit the growth and development of service cooperatives worldwide, but I think it goes beyond just the service sector. I think it's kind of a formula that could be applied for also industrial cooperatives. I mean, I cannot talk about the other sectors, but I won't be surprised that it's quite similar. Is that there are two factors that are key to see significant growth and development of cooperatives. First would come from more the governmental level. I mean, in being it national, but complementarity with regional level also is very interesting, depending how the country is organized. And this implies adequate legal frameworks, as I said before. I mean, if you want to see cooperatives succeeding in some sectors, first, you have to be sure that they can register and operate in those sectors. So you need adequate laws. Adequate law is not enough. We know that just having a law is not enough for cooperatives to grow. But very often a law will then open the doors for other political support. I mean, political, I talk about policy measures. So programs to support cooperatives and specific funds, etc. So this comes from more the governmental level. Then the second pillar will be the organization of the cooperative movement as itself. I mean, we've seen that in the countries where cooperatives have achieved a significant scale, in those countries, cooperatives are also very well organized and structured in federations, in apex organizations. They have their own financial instruments, which is very important, because we all know that the cooperatives have struggles to gain funds. Especially, I mean, if a cooperative knock on the door of a commercial bank, I mean, we all know the obstacles that the cooperative is facing. So if you have your own cooperative mutualistic funds that understand and the cooperative characteristics and how cooperatives operate, this is crucial, and very often that can be used as a guarantee then to go and knock on the commercial banks or other financing institution doors, because you already have some kind of a guarantee that you already have some starting capital or some financial support. And so we really see that this is crucial to have this double intervention, double support coming from the governmental level, but also the self-organization of the cooperative movement is key. And just to mention, in some countries, I mean, like Italy or France, I mean, and cooperatives are obliged by law to give a percentage of their annual benefits to cooperative mutualistic funds, and those funds can in turn support new cooperatives to be established, existing cooperatives to scale or to grow, etc. So this is really crucial, and I think that this is also something we should be working on also inside the cooperative movement across countries. I think that there's also potential maybe to work on some mutualistic cooperative financial instruments that are cross-national. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things that could be done here to allow cooperatives to grow and have a better access to funding and financial support.
So I think one other issue which is constant across whichever country we go is to see how we can get the younger people interested in cooperatives. And you did mention about the coding event that's going to happen at the ICA Global Conference. So that's one way, using technology, getting them more to know more about cooperatives is a way to go about it. But how are you, what is your, again, observation from across countries in being able to get the younger generation interested in co-ops?
Thank you for this very important question, Balwai. I mean, indeed, I think today we all agree in the cooperative movement that intergenerational succession is key in our movement, and that we need to make a place and make sure that young people, young cooperators are joining our movement, and that they will be the one, bringing our movement and leading it in the next years. but it's still a challenge. Indeed, it's still a challenge in many countries. Although I know that in the Asia Pacific you have a very good organization of the younger cooperators, it's a very dynamic and big movement. So congratulations for that. I know that it's also your organization willingness to do so and support young people to be better engaged in the cooperative movement. But still, I mean, the challenge is at different levels. I mean, first, many young people don't hear about cooperatives. Even those who are studying or who are being trained to be to work to be business managers, who are working to develop future entrepreneurial activities, they don't know about the cooperative model. So we know that promotion of the cooperative model at school level in education is key. And I think earlier we start, better it is. There are some very interesting examples, by the way, of school cooperatives that are also created in primary school, where children, pupils, through some games are learning, I mean, intercooperation, and they're learning about the cooperative model. So learning about the cooperative model in schools from earliest stage, I would say this is essential, but also, of course, a specific focus in a curricula dealing with management, in business schools, etc., will be key. And I think then partnership between the cooperative movement and the educational centers, schools, training centers is also key. I mean, we cannot count just on the others to teach about cooperatives. We have to ensure that we also invest and engage in this type of education. I think that there has been some progress over the last years. I mean, we now 2 weeks we will gather in New Delhi for the ICA Global Conference. I mean, there will be a delegation of young people. We know that the ICA Youth Committee and network is quite well structured. So we see that there is progress in the cooperative movement to ensure a better visibility and representation of young people. I believe that still some sectors are facing bigger challenges than the others. I mean, we know, for example, that in the service sector, in specifically in some activities like, I don't know, in the platform economy, we will see more young people, while maybe in some other sectors, in the construction sector, maybe we'll face a bit more aging population and aging workers. So some sectors, I think, are more concerned by the age dimension than the others. You mentioned coding, and I think this is a very interesting also opportunity to link youth involvement in the cooperative movement with also some with the discussions about technology and the technological development, which is also per se an interesting opportunity and challenge for the cooperative movement. So I mean, without big surprise, we realize that tech cooperatives are very often they are worker cooperatives, and very often they are youth cooperatives. I mean, very often in those sectors, workers are quite young. So we see here a very interesting opportunity, and especially in the tech sector, we see that there is also a very high level of international connections. In that sector, cooperators are maybe a bit more keen to liaise, collaborate, work with cooperators from other sides of the work because of the sectoral characteristics. I think it's quite obvious, no? I mean, if you are developing some applications, or you're working on some technological aspects, it's quite logical that many of them speak English. Many of them, can easily collaborate more than in other sectors. So here we really see quite interesting dynamics, which is quite motivating to see. I mean, many young people across the world active in tech cooperatives who really are hungry of intercooperation, international cooperation, and we are really happy to provide this space in New Delhi in 2 weeks during our coding event that will take place on Thursday, 28th of November in the afternoon, and to discuss two topics: how the cooperative movement can better support and provide enabling conditions for tech cooperatives to grow, but also this is also very interesting when we talk about also intergenerational aspects, how tech cooperatives can help traditional cooperatives to digitalize, because we know that many traditional sectors, insurance, agriculture, industrial, etc., they need to digitalize. I mean, and they're very often buying digital services for providers, while we in the cooperative movement have amazing experiences of tech cooperatives who provide those services. So we really want also to create those opportunities for maybe this younger sector to help this more traditional sector, you know, to overcome one of the biggest challenges, which is digitalization for our cooperatives.
Yeah, smiling when you were mentioning about primary cooperatives at the primary level. During the conference, there is going to be a speaker from the Philippines who's 10 years old and a member of the Savings and Credit Cooperatives who's going to be speaking. So
very good, very
yeah,
good.
and Philippines also is a good example when you mention about cooperatives themselves have a role to play, because they have what is called laboratory cooperatives. So the parent cooperative sets up a lab where young people can come and learn and experiment. So that way there is the intergenerational engagement which happens, and it's a laboratory. So you can experiment, you can
Nice.
try things, learn, fail, and then build your interest in the cooperatives. But we are also looking forward to the coding event that you're organizing. Very exciting the way you described it. So we're looking forward to that. My last question is 2025 is the International Year of Cooperatives. So what would you have in particular to say in terms of what the co-op movement should be doing, especially in relation to the subject that we are talking in terms of social and service cooperatives?
Well, it's, I think we all agree that this is a great opportunity. I mean, the last International Year of Cooperatives was 13 years ago. So, of course, I mean, it's a great opportunity that we need to seize. I mean, I think that it's a permanent effort for the cooperative movement to gain visibility and recognition also toward the international organizations. I mean, I think that when it comes to UN, a great work has been done over the last years to promote social economy, which in which we, of course, know cooperatives are one of the key components. But more can be done, and I think that more can always be done. You know, so I'm thinking that also as a cooperative movement, we also have a great opportunity maybe during this year to engage with other UN agencies, maybe which we've been working less over the time. I mean, we know that the ILO is a great partner for the cooperative movement historically, but I think that other UN agencies, there's a great opportunity also to work with them, like UNESCO and others. But I would also think that some other international organizations such as OECD and others could also be. We should also diversify a bit our outreach and really seize this opportunity of the International Year to gain a better recognition and promotion. Now, when we to come back to the topics we discussed before, next year during the ILO International Labour Conference, there will be two topics on the agenda that are very important for the cooperative movement. The one will be the decent work in the platform economy. And the other one will be the transition from informal to formal employment. So we as CICOPA will also working hand in hand with ICA to make sure that at this occasion as well, we ensure the greatest recognition of cooperatives' contribution in those two important areas.
Okay, thank you very much, Diana. It's been a very enlightening and enriching conversation. I think you've taken us through the whole spectrum of definition, trends, challenges, opportunities, where we can work together. So at the Asia Pacific region, we are definitely looking forward to see how through CICOPA Asia Pacific, we can engage with CICOPA. And the point you mentioned about cooperation among cooperatives. So it's also cooperation among the IC entities is very important. So we definitely look forward to our engagement. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you, Bali. I mean, Balu, I really appreciated this conversation. It was very interesting, and I'm very glad being part of this initiative, and also looking forward to see you in 2 weeks and continue all those conversations, because I think we started some very interesting topics, but they deserve more time, no? So I would be happy to continue this conversation with you and other colleagues from the region.
Definitely. Looking forward to seeing you in Delhi.
Me too.